Can I get us even like one more step upstream and talk a little like economics and monetary theory?
No.
Great.
Okay.
Have you guys heard
I don't know
of
what you just said. I don't know what you just said, but sure.
Well, I'm going to say something else you might not know. Have you heard of the Cantillon effect?
Nope.
Okay. So
I
this
like cantaloupes. I know what a cantaloupe is.
Perfect.
Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest.
Hey, welcome into Jesus in the Upper Left. Good to be with you again. My name's Tim, and I am longtime pastor in Portland. I do some stuff with Western Seminary, lead a couple cohorts, helping out as an interim, and I get to be a part of this fantastic network, Multiply PDX. Gabe, you're next.
All right. My name is Gabe Kolstad. I'm a pastor at Westside Community Church in Beaverton on the west side of Portland, and also happy to be part of this connection with Multiply PDX and Jesus in the Upper Left.
Hey guys, my name is Ahshuwah Hawthorne. I used to be on this podcast, and they tried to get rid of me, and I've clawed my way back after a long hiatus.
Yeah. The Where's Ahshuwah hiatus.
Claude, that's
Yeah.
So let's actually start there. We got a topic that we wanted to discuss today that's actually relevant to every ministry leader, whether you're planting a church, whether you're traveling and on your way and feel called to the Portland metro area or the Pacific Northwest, or if you're leading a ministry or a church in the Northwest. So I'm going to hold off on that topic real fast, but first just want to do kind of an update and a welcome back to Ahshuwah. So can you kind of tell us where have you been? What's been going on? How about that?
Well, I'm still here in Portland. Originally, I took a sabbatical because we had a new baby born. So Evelyn was born in February of this year, and our eighth little one. So I now have a college student all the way down to a baby in diapers.
Wow.
So I just needed a break. I took time off of work and ministry, and then as we got back into it, it was largely ministry that just started growing, and new opportunities emerged with some consulting work, our next granting round, and then we ended up hiring another full-time guy to work on some global projects.
Wow.
And so it's just been a lot of Brilliance Labs work. And then as I was getting into that and some of our global work, some other friends from outside Portland said, "Hey, join our podcast." And I'm like, "Oh, what do I do? I'm already have this other podcast." And
yeah, so threw you under the bus and you jumped to the shiny new opportunity.
they promised like more zeros in behind the zero that I get paid for this one.
Was that the trick? That's we got to figure that out. Like,
brilliant.
So I started doing another weekly podcast called To the Unknown Pod. And we largely talk about dad issues, and we look at just kind of like Twitter posts that are interesting that relate to like role of dads, Christian husbands, and then finance and economics and Bitcoin. And that's largely kind of our topics. And it's just a group of friends that kind of go for an hour and a half talking about these random topics. And it's been fun. But honestly, I've missed you guys. And I think there's a way to also jump back in here. Honestly, it was part of the inspiration was a conversation we had at a Together PDX meeting last month, and it was a church planter that moved to Portland and said, "Hey, this podcast was really just a key determiner and a key catalyst for him coming to Portland and feeling prepared in church planting." And I'm like, "Okay, Lord, there actually is some fruit. We weren't just like sitting down in front of cameras once a week for months on end talking to ourselves. Maybe the Lord used it." So yeah, I would like to jump back in, and I think there's still a lot of good work to do and amazing church leaders to interview in our city and other topics to address.
Well, I maybe I speak on behalf of Tim and myself when we say you're forgiven. and you're welcome back.
Thank you.
Officially.
Thank you.
Well, and since we're recording this, we'd also just like to acknowledge that this is a negotiation, and so we're offering you an additional 4 zeros behind the zero, and assuming that you will sign on for that, and welcome back. So it's great to have you. And honestly, that is super encouraging to hear that that God's calling a church planter and has birthed a church in somebody's heart. And this was some small part of that, of encouraging them and equipping them along the way, which is obviously the vision from the beginning. And that's
Have you guys
deeply
interviewed that
encouraging.
church planner yet? And if not, we should do that.
I think I know who you're talking about, but I'm not sure. So slide it across the table, and then we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be fun to connect when we get them on. So yeah. And if it's the one I think you're talking about, I was in a conversation with somebody else about a potential building for that person who has not even started yet. So
wow,
kind of fun
everybody
to see.
Like, who the heck is this? What are you guys talking about?
Oh, shoot. And in case I raise the expectation of, I want to move to Portland and plant a church and they have buildings.
Yeah.
Maybe we do. But yeah. Well, hey, Ahshuwah, it's great to have you back. It's good to be here with us. So here's the topic for today. Money. So we want to talk about fundraising. And here's the deal. We have done zero extensive research and preparing to record lists. What has happened is this has popped up in a number of different conversations. I want to say randomly, but the truth is it's not random. It's probably spirit-led in some level. And this is a need and a reality that all of us have as we lead ministries and seek to multiply and plant churches. And so we've got some kind of different avenues to explore here and different experience and different questions. And so, Gabe, you kind of got a question. So I kind of wanted to pitch it to you first to kind of kick us off.
Okay. Yeah. My question that keeps rattling around my head, and you're right, it just keeps on coming up. And it seems like every time I have a conversation with somebody related to Multiply PDX or Jesus in the Upper Left, there's something about money and how it's such a hardship. Really, it's a hardship related to, I think, urban unreached church planting. It's a unique animal. My church is in the suburbs, so I think the dynamics are a little different in the suburbs than it would be in the inner urban core. But I wouldn't say that they're entirely opposite. It's not like my church is in Texas and, then there's the urban Portland stuff. But so there's challenges for me, particularly our church is in a sort of economically challenged community on the west side of Portland. So I get some of the struggle, not all of it, but I think, when I think about what our task is for multiplying the gospel in a city like Portland, especially the urban center, definitely funding ministry comes up as a challenge all the time. And, I look at it and go, well, there's multiple aspects to that, right? There's working smarter, not harder, in terms of going, well, what sort of financial advantages could we embrace or pursue? What kind of stewardship education should we, what kind of discipleship and stewardship education should we be talking about? Is generosity a part of people's spiritual growth? Of course it is. So then there's that piece, but there's just going to be a lot higher expense in an urban center. And then there's going to be other economic challenges that are kind of related in terms of even like the demographics that are attending. If you got a lot of young people, it's going to be harder to fund something. And if you don't have a lot of seasoned Christians, it's going to be harder to fund something. So there's all those challenges. And so then the solution is not, okay, then let's just focus on outside of the urban center because it's easier. It's easier to fund. So the other questions I think that come up is model. There's models that are way more expensive or way more economical, way more sustainable. So I think those are the things that are in my mind that go, how do we address this? How do we help maybe relieve some tension and provide some direction on the conversation? And then for me as a pastor, I'm thinking a lot like, how does my church grow toward this? And even how does our church become a solution to what's going on in the city that we might be able to be a part of? So that's where my headspace is on this.
That's a lot more than one question. So that's
Sorry.
that was like 3 dozen. It felt like.
Yeah, 36 questions. That's what I thought we said.
We're ready to go. Ready to go. Yeah. No, it's a. I mean, you framed so many things there too. It's just the difference between. I mean, you listed off a number of factors, and thinking about the urban core of a city, and obviously Portland. Thinking specifically of Portland's and everything's more expensive closer in you are.
Yeah.
And then you also have you have those that are more needy financially and lower income in the urban core, and you have higher income that live in the urban core. So it's an interesting combination that if you're a church in the urban core, you are ministering and called to the whole kind of spectrum of income levels and needs, and in that sense, physical kind of financial needs. And so it's challenging right out of the gate on a couple different levels. Ahshuwah has the answer for us, and he's going to tell us where we can find all the funding and the money, and how to disciple people to be generous. And
so, well, okay. So Ecclesiastes 10:19, right? I don't know if that's your life verse or the daily Caleb power verse, but it says, "Bread is for laughter, and wine gladdens life, and money answers everything." And I mean, if you're a Portland church planner, I mean, how about that? Like, you got the bread and the wine right there.
There you go.
And you just need the money, and you got a church plant. So, well, I mean, we can go so many directions, right? Like, do we want to talk about models? Because the model is upstream of the funding question, right? Because the model tells you how much you need. If we're stepping out of our traditional attractional church and say, hey, we're going to go start a reproducible, simple church and make disciples, you're literally going to do like what our friend did and quit his church job and go start a small business, because you're modeling that for the disciples that you're making. You don't want them showing up and inviting people to your church and listening to you. You want them starting churches and reaching their neighbors. And so there's this high intensity on reproducibility. And in that case, it's this whole co-vocational model, which, let's talk about this next. I think if you try to do a traditional church with co-vocational, that's when you're ready to get an ulcer and maybe go to marriage counseling, because you're trying to do two very hard things at once, starting a business and starting a traditional church. So I think you almost have like a diagram, like a decision tree of your model. Okay, if you're really going incarnational, then go start a small business, get embedded in the community, have the long view, be self-sustainable financially, and model that for your disciples who make disciples. If you're going traditional, you probably do have to raise a bunch of money, because that's a full-time job. What do you guys think about that?
I have mixed feelings on it. I think, there's model and then there's scale of the model, because if you're talking about, attractional, I don't think the word is very helpful as much as going like we're talking about is almost a gathering versus ascending, so if you're going to gather people in any space, you got to have, you're going to have to lease something, or there's got to be, you can't do it in a living room, if it's going to scale, right? So then it becomes, now we have a building fund. But does it need to be like, if you're talking about urban ministry, do you need 10,000 square feet, 20,000 square feet? Probably not. That might not even be helpful, right? I mean, there's going to be a question about what's even helpful for ministry in urban centers. So I think because why I say the scale matters, because if you're talking about a scale of you need, a couple of part-time staff members and a small space lease, I think you can ride that line with administration, and the amount of time it takes to build something like that, versus if you're going to go, well, this is a larger model and it's going to have a regional reach, and so therefore we're going to have multi staff, all of that kind of stuff. Then it just depends on what the vision is, I guess. But that's probably to your point. The vision kind of drives the need.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think we're talking about financial resources, fundraising money right now, but that's down the line from that piece comes in down the line from a vision for a church plant and where God's leading. And so the vision has to start it. And some people are gifted, wired, and God gives them a call to start something that is a larger gathering that requires space and those kind of things. And so the money question comes in further down the line than the are you called? And that is a lot of it. Like, is somebody? I mean, you joke about the ulcer and marriage counseling, and I would agree. Don't try to do both. Like, that's not necessarily a vision as much as it is a collection of really good ideas that you like and try to do them all. But people are wired and gifted differently, where somebody can handle, like our buddy that is able to run a business and multiply disciple making discovery Bible studies and simple churches and those kind of things. And others are going to be wired and gifted differently. Like I'm not maybe a fundraiser. I'm a really good teacher, evangelist, and a large gathering serves my gifts well. And that's where God's called me to contribute. And so I think, I guess early on for church planners specifically is having a mentor or a coach that is able to say, money will be a big piece of this, and don't be oblivious to it. So clarify the vision, but then know, like, this is going to be a piece of it down the road, and you're going to have to learn how to teach about giving, learn how to manage that, pastor and counsel people through it, make tough decisions, have those around you that know how to handle it, all of those kind of things that go with it.
Yeah, and I think there's something to the discipleship piece that I've been in ministry a long time, and I've been struggling with this question even in my own context for a long, long time. I don't know. I guess I don't know of a church that's not, right. It's like no church is going like, man, we just have so much money, we don't know what to do with it. But the more that I see my own responsibility to guide people toward, ridiculous generosity, it does sort of start to answer some of the need. And so having, that discipleship strategy that's robust enough to take people to that place, maybe even in the beginning of a church plant, would be really important. To plant with some of that long-term thinking would be really helpful, because from the moment that the first disciple shows up, if their angle is, that fully developing, what does that look like? I think that's really good. And it's not a bait and switch either, then it's like the real deal. Jesus is like, give me everything. And I think that's true. The question that I often have is, do we really need to, do we need to take another look sometimes at the model? Because are we actually just wasting resources sometimes? Is the question.
I think that begs the question of the who you are called to reach and the where.
Yeah.
Right. And that's also upstream, right? So you have this church vision, you have this calling that it needs to be before your financial model. But I mean, where you're going, urban or suburban, and focused on a diverse community, a marginalized community, low income, versus going into a more affluent area. Like, there's different. You're going to have to think differently. And then also, I mean, Gabe, you argued for hey, teach them stewardship, but like, how many years does that take if you're reaching a lost person versus someone who's already a Christian who's come to attend your church? Like, I seem to think when I'm feeling more cynical, I think church planting finances almost require existing Christians who already know how to tithe.
I totally agree. I think there has to be that partnership. Yeah, I think that's really true. Where you can't, it'd be foolish, right, to not have, because it also, I mean, that's only an indication that we need mature disciplers in every new plant, right? Like, if you drop in, and this is probably why a lot of church planting struggles, is if you drop in and you don't have any of that, and it's all on one person or one family or one very small team, then it makes sense that never develops.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and just to throw another challenge in there is the generational challenge, where not only are there less people who grow up with a church background or a faith background or a maturing kind of faith when they're actually giving. And we know this is like statistically all over the place, right? That newer generations want to give in different ways culturally, and then come to meet Jesus, are part of a local church, and then they're still translating that kind of how they give and where needs are. And so the like that cliff of downward trend in generational giving um, is another reality and a huge challenge. And so to to disciple someone who's new to the faith, one, but then generationally just has different kind of their default setting in terms of what even giving looks like and how much and all those kinds of things are such a different challenge than say 20, 30, 40 years ago. Even as we're talking, I just keep thinking, like, particularly in an urban context, how significant. I mean, Ahshuwah, you said the people that you're called to reach, but where the model comes in so quickly. And I think what we've seen in Portland is so many folks from outside have come in, quote, fully funded for a period of time, and then run according to their budget, and then end when their outside funding ends, and then they have to pack up and go because they've made a kid or two, and they're like, we can't live here anymore, our funding's gone. And so what happens then is the funding actually begins to drive the mission and shape the vision rather than vice versa. And that's just a tough reality and a story that's happened over and over and over again.
Wow. We faced, something in our church that has happened. I was just having a conversation with a planter today about this, and we faced years and years of real struggle with this at our church Westside because we were doing just honestly, the Lord was doing something really special with new believers for a long time now. And there's been this steady flow of just tons of new believers. And so we end up with this church full of brand new believers. And we just honestly never got we couldn't get one foot in front of the other fast enough to build the discipleship model that it would take to help with that. And I think for us, it was until COVID happened, and then we just had forced slowdown and then a total reorientation of our ministry that gave us the luxury of time to build something different. And that currently is working a lot better than what we were doing before. So that's been exciting, but there's that intentional kind of thing. And I think what it really relies on is partnership from the mature that are on mission. And so maybe that's something that's not just within a ministry itself. Maybe that's something that could be cross city. I wonder if that kind of collaboration could be a part of the story on helping fund, strategically ministries that are just gonna require more help.
Mm-hmm. Have you guys read?
Go ahead.
Have you guys read Mark DeMaz's stuff on church economics?
I was just pulling it up to try to remember the name of it.
Yeah.
Coming revolution in church economics. Yeah.
So he argues for a three-legged stool, and one, he's big on the multi-ethnic church, and he's calling for like church to the marginalized, to the unreached, to the needier communities that are multi-ethnic often. And so those areas are just hard to fund, right? It's not, you're not going to be a Bible Belt megachurch in Portland, let alone like the hood somewhere. And so he says, okay, so if you're trying to do a multi-ethnic church reaching least reached marginalized communities, you need to have two other legs of funding. And one he argues for is like business enterprises, particularly they do real estate and like commercial leasing. So they bought a big old like Kmart or something in a part of town that had really suffered economically. And then they brought in anchor tenants like a gym and other things. And they were able to take advantage of not having property taxes and then be able to have commercial leasing that created a revenue stream for them. And then that final leg of the stool is this idea of starting 501c3 nonprofits that can be citywide and can do mission work, but rally funding from multiple churches and multiple sources. And he gives the illustration of like one pastor goes down the street to another pastor and from different denomination, different like tribe, and essentially says, "Hey, we're doing a food bank. Would you donate to our food bank?" And of course, the pastor says, "Well, no, actually, we're doing a food bank. We already have our thing, or our denomination does our food bank. And no, I'm not giving to yours." But if instead your church starts a ministry and it's an independent 501c3, though maybe some of your elders might sit on the board, and it's an initiative of your church, but it's separate. Now, all of a sudden, when you go to that same pastor, he's not viewing like competition, like, "Oh, you're trying to get people to your church." He says, "Oh, this is a common cause type of let's work together and feed the homeless and hungry in our community. So sure, okay, I'll send volunteers. I'll even send funding." And so this idea of starting independent, both like some for-profit entities as well as non-church nonprofits that can bring in funding more effectively than just your church can.
Yeah, smart. So you're still getting the work done of the ministry in the city. It's just now it's a team, and there's the potential of going out and raising funds separately.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I just loved how he was kind of ringing the bell of like, things are changing, and he starts with like trends are changing, so that old downward generational trends, those kind of things. I mean, the title of this book is "The Coming Revolution in Church Economics," and so it's like, what? And then, but he's lived some things out and experimented with some things, and I think and I don't know that this is necessarily true of many church planters, although I'm sure it is. Some is like, my job is going to be my church plant, and that's going to cover my family's salary. And as we're talking model in particular, like that's just not true. And so many are thinking creatively and new models and new ways, because that's not. So when you really are called and you're like, I have to go, I'm called here. Yeah, that might mean getting a co-vocational job, another job outside, or thinking creatively of using renting out space, right? Long-term lease and those kinds of things. And I think that was so helpful for me. It's like, it was permission giving to, yeah, go for this. This isn't such a big hurdle. This is an open door to walk through and try out some different things. And even starting from that is not, and obviously we've seen plenty of people experiment with that and try that out. I think that's needed.
It kind of call back to we just recorded an episode with Scott Bradley from As His Church, and they didn't do what we're talking about here, but they have a very creative new approach that I think is going to be fantastic for what they're trying to accomplish in Rockwood, that area of Portland that so needs this ministry. So that's exciting to go. Maybe sometimes pressure forces the kind of creativity that the Holy Spirit's been trying to birth. And there you go. It's happening in Rockwood now. That's fun.
Well, and that's a great example of what you were just saying, Ahshuwah, of when you have the church name on it. It's sometimes a little bit harder to partner when you take it off and make it a neutral territory to accomplish a shared vision and task. It's a lot easier, and I think that's hopefully what we're seeing start to gain momentum that Scott's leading in Rockwood with the Hope Center and what was it, the underground workout gyms and that kind of thing.
They have CrossFit.
Yeah, they do.
Well, I thought it was so like, Scott, hope you're listening. Love you, respect you a ton. Man, do not apologize for starting that. He was like, we just never thought we would charge money for people to come to CrossFit. I'm like, dude, there are going to be Christians and non-believers who can pay for CrossFit membership. And it was beautiful. He said, like, he told everybody, when you come and you sign up for this new gym in Rockwood, you're covering not just you, but you're covering somebody else, a youth in this neighborhood, to be able to participate in a CrossFit workout every, membership, whatever. And I mean, he was almost like, we never thought we would do this. I was like, dude, way to go. Like, you guys are excellent in it. You have a draw.
Yeah.
Like, awesome. Yeah.
Reminded me of the Tom's shoes or whatever, you buy a pair and then somebody else pair. It's a great model.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can I get us even like one more step upstream and talk a little like economics and monetary theory?
No.
Great.
Okay.
Have you guys heard
I don't know what you just said. I don't know what you just said, but sure.
Well, I'm going to say something else you might not know. Have you heard of the Cantillon effect?
Nope.
Okay. So
I like cantaloupes. I know what a cantaloupe is.
So it's an economic principle. You can grok it. But it basically says...
That's a verb now?
Yeah. Google it, grok it. I mean,
right.
Jip it, GPT it. I don't know. So, it's the principle that says the closer you are to the money printer and the source of new money that enters the economy, the more you will benefit. And the farther away you are from the source of new money in the economy, the more you will suffer from inflation and monetary debasement. So, for example, right? So, where is the most kind of wealth accumulated? Well, you have Silicon Valley with all the tech and the venture capital. You have New York and all the banks, and you have DC and all the politicians. And it's basically the banks and the politicians that are creating the new money in the economy. And so, for us, talking about ministry and church planters, if we're funded by just normal everyday people, then we're far removed from the money printer. And if you look at what happened since 2020, where it's something like, the majority of all new money that's ever been printed was printed in like a 2-year period, as trying to save the economy after COVID. And I've been preparing for a session I'm doing for Mission Increase. Shout out to Tracy and Mission Increase. We're going to do an event at the Palau building tomorrow. And I've been doing a little research. And basically, the cost of doing business for a church or ministry has gone up 20 to 30% since 2020. So we're talking cost to employ personnel, cost for health insurance, property acquisition, and even just program costs in general, 20 to 30%. And that's obviously with probably not giving our people 20 to 30% raises over the 5-year period so they can meet their needs. So ministry's gotten way more expensive. And then also stats on active donors. So there's 5% less U.S. donors since 2020, and yet large donors have increased by 11%. So normal people are suffering and not donating to churches and ministries. The 1% that benefited the most from all the money printing, they now have even more surplus, so they're giving more. But that's just kind of the reality of the financial world we live in. And then you talk about Portland. Portland, it's not yet in a death spiral, but there is definitely a vicious cycle of when you don't punish crime or you even reward crime, then businesses leave. And then tax revenue goes down, and now you have less enforcement of crime, and you have less, so it's harder for business, and it's honestly like it's happening in Portland. So in general, nonprofits that benefit from donors and the fruit of business happening, we're suffering even more. So that's the reality. And churches have closed because of that. I would argue. COVID was a whole you know what storm of junk in Portland, but part of it has been economic.
So the takeaway is what?
So, well, if you were at my seminar, I would say, hey, one of the solutions to this is Bitcoin. And just a couple numbers. Okay. So Bitcoin's up 400%.
I didn't see that coming.
You didn't see it? No.
I didn't see that coming.
I know, out of the blue. So Bitcoin's up 400% in that same 5-year period. Okay. So if you're denominating your cost of doing business in dollars, you have 20 to 30% less to go around. If you were denominating your funding in Bitcoin, then your cost of doing business and ministry has gone down 74% in 5 years.
Like if you were just operating from Bitcoin instead
You
of
were just operating from Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Cost of doing business went down 74%. And now you're going to say, well, who in the world would do that? And I'm not necessarily telling churches you should just operate with Bitcoin, but I'll share a number of case studies tomorrow where there are fruitful Christian ministries that are funding with Bitcoin. They're using Bitcoin. They're receiving donations from wealthy Bitcoin donors. They're using it for economic community development. They're using it for long-term savings. Every church has an emergency fund. Every church should have a deferred maintenance building fund if they have a roof they have to care for. There's things that just a crazy story. I have a really good friend down in Roseburg, and they have a growing church that rents an auditorium. I mean, we're talking 400 to 500 person church that has no building. They're renting a large auditorium at a school, and they had a building fund, and they raised money, and it was something like 10 million or something. And then 4 years later, it's now 14 million. The same cost for the same building project.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, the cost of building the building is going up faster than this medium to large size church can raise the money.
Not surprising.
So, yeah. So that I would say very few people would adopt that solution. But honestly, if that church had put maybe 10% into Bitcoin, that would have kept up that growth in the cost.
So just looking for, and I've heard you talk about this before, and even because I think we were at a lunch together, and you mentioned we were just picking each other's brains. You mentioned this idea about having a Bitcoin-based savings for the church or investment fund, basically for the church. And I mean, my immediate thought was, gosh, I wonder what my board would think about something like that, or gosh, I wonder what our giving base at our church would think about something like that. Would they think that's risky? Would they think that's smart? I don't know. Good chance they're diversifying. That nobody's like, I don't know of people that are just taking cash and put it on their mattress. They would be like, no, that'd be dumb. So would they not think it would be smart for the church to do the same thing that they do so that they can protect their future? Church protect their future. I thought it was an interesting thought. When you mentioned that at lunch months and months ago, you said something about a roof, and I was like, why would you be talking about that, Ahshuwah? Because I know that our roof needs to be repaired at our church, and I know that we don't have enough money in our savings, So it made me think about that. And actually, I have something on one of my task lists. It still says, and it's deferred now. It's like, look into Bitcoin-based, investment fund for the church. If anybody from our board is listening to this, I meant to bring it up at the last meeting. So,
what do you think, Tim?
Oh man, you know what? I just got to get this off the top of my head. I read an article about a guy who was a church leader and did some scam with Bitcoin, and it went tank and all that. So obviously, so let me ask a clarifying question first.
Different. But go ahead.
What's that?
Crypto. I've heard multiple. There's so many crypto scams out there.
So many.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just as we're talking about fundraising. Let's just also kind of side note acknowledge money can be the root of all kinds of evil, right? And so we all struggle with that and fears of insecurity and all of those things. And so it can be a tool that Satan uses to derail church plants. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just a reality of leading, and at any era, and particularly now for sure. But so just clarifying question, is this just another version of investment and wise stewardship of money? Is that kind of your starting point? So
I would say, without going down so much into the rabbit hole and the details, so we spend a lot of time figuring out getting money. We're either working for money or fundraising. We don't tend to spend a lot of time thinking through how to preserve the value of that money once we get it. And we live in a world post 1971 when Nixon came out and said, okay, you can no longer trade in your dollars for gold. And so he took us off the gold standard. And since then, that's when we deal with this reality of monetary debasement, and that the money we have loses its value. And when that happens, you have to go to other places to save. And so that's why houses are so expensive. And it's largely not because of just the utility value of having a house. It's because there is a lot of investment money that's looking for places to park their money to earn a return. And so they buy real estate. And so that's the reality we live in. And Christians tend to be more conservative. And of course, we're not going to try to pick investments. And most nonprofits will say, you give us a donation in a stock or a crypto or something, we're going to convert it to dollars. But then we deal with things like, our building fund, just like the cost just went up 30 or 40%. So what do we do? Because of things that the government is doing that's outside of our control. And I would just say there are creative things that we can do that just sidestep that. And there is an argument to be said for it's bad stewardship to raise, right? Like to lose 40% of the value of your money over a 5-year period when you're trying to build a building. Now, the challenge is when church or nonprofit leaders are playing not to lose instead of trying to play to win. So that board that raised the money and now has to come back to the church and says, well, we need another $4 million. No one's going to blame them that building costs went up.
Right.
Like that's just an accident of history. But there actually were other ways to do it. And so that's where I'm like challenging leaders to say, you know what? There are other creative ways and there is risk involved. There is you have to, maybe it's not the best thing for a church. Maybe it's something an individual thinks about, but there's still, I think there's other ways. And it's, and I think I'd love to talk about things outside of that for, how do we rethink ministry as it gets more expensive? And as like Damaz says, he thinks it's a revolution. He thinks it's a change. I don't know. I think the Bible Belt is always going to have a lot of extra money to fund big buildings and churches. But maybe Portland's going to get harder and harder.
I think it has. I've been here, 18? Gabe, you've been here a lot longer. Ahshuwah, I'm not sure how long you've been in Portland, but it's gotten harder. It's changed, like all those realities of, that you just said, like the outside of our control. So I went through years when health insurance didn't go up 5 or 10 or 12, it jumped 20, 22, and that you have to change your budget when that happens. Like that's, you got a staff of, we had staff of 15 or something, and it's like, that's a massive tweak to your budget that year. And so those kind of things are really, I think it is changing, maybe not quite revolution, but, significant difference. I guess off the top of my head, I would say many churches are very cautious of where they put what savings they do have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could see under the general wisdom of diversifying, like trying that out and sticking some in Bitcoin. I don't know the first thing about Bitcoin, so take that for what it's worth. But we do that right now, right? We put stuff in certain money market accounts, and I just had a board member in the church that I'm helping as an interim say, we're not getting enough on this. Let's move $250,000 over here and put it in this account to raise for the percentage to be better. And I'm like, all right, like, sure. So, they decided to do that. It was a good call so far. So I don't know if you take a portion of that and try Bitcoin. I can, that doesn't seem like the craziest idea, but
especially if it's not money that the ministry is depending on for survival. And I could see that being a reasonable risk. The thing about a church plant is there is no money that the church isn't depending on for survival. So how do you, if you could begin, maybe that's another thing. Like here's an interesting thing we changed. Like we used to run things super close. And if anybody saw behind the curtain at our church right now, you'd be like, well, you still run things really close, and not even close to as close as it used to be. And the thing that we changed was we're simply budgeting next year's and we just had our meeting. We're simply budgeting for next year based on what came in the previous 12 months, rather than projecting an increase, which person like me, who's a little bit apostolic and has a gift of faith, I'm like, it'll be bigger next year. And then, next year comes and sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But if we could figure out how church plants of every model start with margin, then that could maybe be a beginning strategy even.
Well, and one way to play this out would be to try it out, Ahshuwah, are there Bitcoin investments that are people with Bitcoin money wanting to help fund church plants? And it'd be kind of interesting to kind of do it without knowing, and then to come back 5 years and go, oh, well, this church is here in part because Bitcoin investment. And, that would generate some interesting conversation.
There is a real donor community. And if you're willing to say, hey, well, yeah, we'll accept Bitcoin donations, we'll hold it for a time period, or for cash savings, hey, we'll put 5% into Bitcoin, knowing that it's volatile. So if it goes significantly down, we don't need to sell at a loss. But hey, if it does what it's done, it's going to offset that inflation that we have to deal with. So one other question that comes to mind for me is just practically, how do you develop a culture of generosity? And I would love to hear that, where you guys have found success of helping young people, or even helping older boomer generation folks, like give generously.
I cannot speak to like crazy amounts of money. I cannot speak to that. I can speak to lots of people giving a little bit, and people that don't have any faith experience and feel like, had that suspicion of the church and the whole deal, and overcame it. And eventually, and, like for me, I think you asked the question earlier, like, are you referenced, like, how long does it take to, you're dealing with like a non-believer becomes a believer at your church? I mean, we think it's years of trust building, hearing the same message over and over and over again, 100 stories of God's faithfulness, in coming through. And then there's a point at which there's this little bit of a grasp release. I'll just throw this out, and Tim, I'd love to hear your perspective. But we've found that offering a starting point is really helpful for people. So what we've noticed is that since we tried this experiment of saying, if you're not sure, you've never done this before, you think it's a little bit crazy, what about testing God at $25 a week? And it's really interesting how much that's driven, the beginning of people's journey at our church. So that's been something that's helpful, is just like that. I think the question is, I don't have a reference point for that. What do you mean give to a church,
Right.
And so just a beginning place seems to be helpful.
Yeah, I would say something similar in that I don't have experience around a lot of money and massive, tons of dollars. I've been, I've led long enough to be surprised by gifts that have come in that are more money than I would ever have to give, and so that's been fun just for the church, but also personally to see that, as a pastor, going like, oh God, I did not see that coming, and you just kind of you widened my expectations, and I needed that, and so that's been great. I'm serving as an interim pastor right now at a church that we planted out of the church that I led in. It's now 14 years old, and so I've for the last year been able to serve there as an interim. And I walked in, and second board meeting I was in, I said, hey, help me understand something. I walked through your parking lot. I use our language now. I walk through our parking lot, and then I see the books at the end of the month, and these don't line up. Can we talk about that? And the board, they were great. They said, "Oh, you're right. Very nice cars, highly educated church." And they said, "No, you're right. If you looked at the cars in our parking lot, which are all really nice, and then you look at what we give, it doesn't add up." And so I said, "Okay, thanks. That's really helpful." And they actually said, "We just need some biblical teaching on money and finances and giving." And I said, "Great, I can do that." So we did that and just talked openly about it, and kind of aimed and said, "This is what God calls us to." And then, like you said, Gabe, be gracious and open about first steps. And within a year, they've started giving 20 to 25% more than a year ago. And so there is a place just for simply being direct about what the Bible says and tell stories of your own, like, whether it's greed or letting go or testing faith and putting it into practice and those kind of things that it gets in the water and shapes the culture. And then quickly celebrating stories of whether it's God showed up and provided for somebody, or somebody took a risk and gave, or just even collectively, like, hey, this is what we were able to do. When we give, we're able to do this. Look at this money we're able to give away. And so I guess in saying all that, a lot of it takes intentional leadership and taking time to teach towards it, to model it, to celebrate it, to tell stories. And
I remember going to a generous giving, like, if you've ever been to one of their jogs, a journey of generosity. But one of the things that I was challenged at one of those was, why do we so unashamedly develop all the other gifts in the church, but not the gift of giving?
Yeah.
It's weird, right? And so that might be one of the other things that I've personally learned. And so on the other end of the spectrum, like, the new believers spectrum side, and then the maturing believers, I think there is room, Tim, especially at that end, to call people up. And, you got the trust built. They have an appreciation for Scripture, and, to go that route is great. And I think we've seen some fruit from that, but we've had more experience and more fruit on the first front end, and we're growing in the other stuff.
Mm-hmm. You guys mentioned earlier some church planners, they get fully funded, right? And they just show up and they come and they're able to fund. And then when those funds run out, maybe they have to go home. Can a church planner raise too much money? And is there an argument to say, hey, don't try to front load all this and do this big budget?
I instinctually want to say yes. I probably need to defend that a little bit. So I'm really curious what you would say, Gabe. But I would say yes in this sense, in that because money is what it is, it can, depending on the leader and the team and the coach and all of that, it can begin to drive the ship and the decision-making and the culture rather than serve the vision. And so I do think and part of that is based on relationships. Like I've had relationship with guys that are just cruising. They come from a certain network or denomination and they come fully funded, and they're like, oh yeah, I bought a house here and we're looking at renting space here. And I'm like, do you know anybody in the city yet? Do you know the storyline of your neighborhood? Do you know what schools are in need? Like, have you led anyone to Jesus? Like, we're fully funded for 5 years and I bought a house here. And it's like, what's happening here? So they're not actually, it guides the kind of planter that they are. And that's not always a good thing. Sometimes it can be, but it's not always a good thing. So I think it takes a really good, experienced coach to guide somebody in what is enough. I don't know the number or the percentage. I wouldn't want to advise somebody in that, but I think there's experienced coaches that can guide and say, this is what you need to raise. And if you raise past this, you got to add to your team or give it away here or do something. But that's off the cuff answer.
Yeah. Wise words, man. I think that the ideal church plant, regardless of model, would start with 2 people from a neighborhood, and that it would just grow from there. And I think, so if you do the outside heavy funding, you miss all of that journey, right? You miss their journey. And then if spiritual development is anything like parenting, you miss the ownership. 100% you miss the ownership. There's no struggle, and there's no deep dependence on the Lord, for provision, and there's no need for creativity. Like, oh, we got a building just kind of handed to us because some, rich person wrote a check, and but that's not even. I think it steals the journey from people. So my opinion, I definitely think you could raise too much money.
Well, I would add to that too. I love hearing the stories of guys that have come and says, yeah, God's called me to plant a church. I don't know what I'm doing yet. I'm going to get a part-time job or a full-time job and learn. Mm-hmm. And man, some of those have been the most fruitful, and they have that. There's some suffering and sacrifice involved in that. But it also has built trust, built relationship, learned the culture of the city, those kinds of things. And those, you can't buy those. You have to have to live those. And
Man, you guys are full of wisdom. This is awesome.
it's a nice way of saying you're old. Well, so now that now it's complete, anyone who's listened can come to Portland and be fully funded and plant a church that's fruitful. No,
Tim's writing checks. I'm giving Bitcoin.
oh man,
Yeah.
I wonder who would get more calls. Actually, that'd be interesting. So this is if lots of questions, some stories, not maybe a lot of answers. But again, if you're listening and you're not in Portland, the whole heart and motivation behind this is that God would continue to use broken humans who are faithful and willing to risk and sacrifice to live and serve in this region and in this city and see more people come to know Jesus and his kingdom come. And so this is a reality of it, is funding it. And so hopefully you found a little bit of wisdom, joy, encouragement, laughter, and clarity, maybe even. That would be great too. So
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.